Hey everybody, this is Dream, and today we have a big 12-game Major League Baseball slate. I definitely typically advise to play small, but we do have the 1 cent games again today, so we can do a lot of different funny lineups. So I do think it's a good day for doing that kind of stuff. With that said, we do have a pretty good slate here, despite the huge size of the slate. Pitching is weird today, so but I'll get into that in a second. The bats look really solid. I think there's a lot of different ways you can go through this. The Dodgers, Kansas City are going to be your top overall stacks. Houston, New York Yankees, Boston, Milwaukee, Atlanta, Cincinnati, Toronto, the Angels, and Texas all have really good stacks today as well. So I think that's going to be a pretty good slate from that perspective. So let's go and get into our pitchers. We do have one core pitcher here. It'll be Hunter Brown for the Astros, and he's facing Colorado today. He's also been really solid lately. He's underpriced here with the best carry on the slate. And he's got the best upside on the slate with a good ceiling. So he's in a really good situation there, and he's nicely priced at $8,000. I have to think that that's a misprice based on how he's been playing lately, though it is up from what it was. So I still think he was going to be higher today. So I expect him to be a really solid option on the slate. And he's going to be high owned as a result, so do keep that in mind. Some other guys that we do like today, Ryan from Minnesota. Now he has a decent matchup against Arizona. He's been pretty solid lately too. His upside is decent. The K rate has been all right. His price is the highest on the slate, so that limits him a little bit. But he's still very viable, simply because if you want to cook him with a Gosman, you can do that because with Brown, you can do that because you can. Not Gosman, I'm sorry. With Brown, you can do that because you got that price discount there. Lopez for Atlanta is also a good GPP or core play. He has been absolutely phenomenal lately. His K rate is decent too, and he's been really solid. The matchup here is nice as well. He's had some ups and downs, but he should be able to limit the earned runs, at least in this game, so that does give him some upside. And then a couple other GPP options. Lugo for Kansas City. He has a favorable matchup against Miami. He's been kind of rough lately, but he definitely has some potential here. His K rate has just been very inconsistent, which is going to limit his upside. And then Hunter Green, he's got a good strikeout rate here, though he's got a tough matchup being this is a home game. And if we look at his stats, obviously he averages quite a few less fantasy points per game at home than on the road. Obviously, playing Great American Ballpark hurts him some, but he definitely does have good upside because of the K rate and that Pittsburgh is a weaker team. That said, Pittsburgh does have some upside because they do have some power hitters as well. Some extreme GPP plays today. Garrett Cole, he's coming off injury. He only played one game so far. And if he might be still on a pitch limit, but he definitely has some strikeout potential in this game and a favorable match against the Mets. Keller for Pittsburgh he's a very risky play today. He's been solid lately, but he definitely carries some risk as this game being at Great American Ballpark, and Cincinnati does seem to play better there than they do on the road. I also think Gore for Washington has some somewhat upside here. Now he has a high ceiling but a very low floor. He's an extreme GPP play because he's pretty risky here. His K rate has been inconsistent through the season, and San Diego is a team that probably won't strike out as much. Though they won't have Tatis Jr. today. Another guy to consider would be Miller for the Dodgers against the White Sox. The White Sox stink. Miller has really struggled since the first game that he pitched, but he definitely does have enough strikeout potential today to have some upside, but he has not been very good so far this season. And then one more extreme GPP play would be Paft for Arizona. Not the best of matchups here, though he does have a K rate that's high enough to be a considerable contrarian option on the slate. And then I have two Hail Mary plays, one being Anderson for Angels against Oakland. Oakland might hit a couple home runs, but he will probably limit the earned runs for the most part. That said, he's got a low K rate, so it's going to be hard for him to really pay off here, but he's cheap enough that he's considerable. And then also Kevin Gausman, he's got a tough matchup here against Boston. I do think Boston's one of the better teams to stack today. He's been extremely inconsistent this season. He's been all over the place fantasy-wise, but he does have those random games where he just looks like he's unbeatable, and if he does have that kind of game, then he can definitely score more than anybody else on the slate, and he's priced pretty fair for that perspective. With that said, let's go ahead and get into our catchers now. So our top overall plays are going to be Will Smith for the Dodgers. Now he has hit the ball decently well this season. He does have some inconsistencies, and he's priced high. But he is an interesting price point today. If you want to pay up at catcher, he's definitely the best way to go. Yanir Diaz, though, for Houston, looks really solid today. He's got nice home run metrics, and he has some good upside here. He's been hitting the ball really well lately as well, so that gives him a lot of potential here. Logan O'Hope is also in play here. Now, he's in a contrarian spot, but he does have some good home run metrics today. I think Diaz was probably super close to being a core play for me, but honestly, there's just quite a few guys at this position that look pretty solid. I also like Gary Sanchez from Milwaukee a lot. Now, he has not hit the ball particularly great lately, but he does have some potential today at very least, and he's cheap. And then Sean Murphy is a very, or whoever starts for Atlanta, whether it be Sean Murphy or d'Arnaud. If Sean Murphy starts, then he's going to have some potential today, though he has struggled since he's been back from injury, but he does have some good home run metrics. The top owned plays at this position will be Will Smith, Logan O'Hope, and Yanir Diaz, and I think that all those make a lot of sense. Looking at the first baseman, Ohtani jumps off the page at top of our play. He's just been absolutely phenomenal this season. Home runs, hitting, fantasy points per game, everything's been crazy. His price is high, but if you can figure out how to fit him in there, then he's definitely a viable option. Freddie Freeman is also in play as a contrarian play. He's significantly cheaper than Ohtani, but he's also not been quite as good. I do think he's overpriced for the matchup for his potential, but he definitely has good upside in this matchup. Now, Pasquantino, he's been absolutely phenomenal in certain situations, and this matchup, again, just looks phenomenal for him. He did hit a home run yesterday, but the metrics are just in his favor again today, so he's a really great option on the slate. Now, he's one of my favorite plays. Then we'll look at Vlad Jr. Now, Vladdy has been up and down this season, but he is starting to hit the ball really well lately. He's had 3 home runs the last 4 games, and he's priced the same as Pasquantino, so he's definitely a guy's contrarian play. And then a cheap play here would be Nate Lowe for Texas, as he does draw good metrics for this game. And he's been hitting the ball decently well, so he does have some upside here. The top owned options here will be Freddie Freeman, Pasquantino, and then Ohtani. Looking at second base, this position is pretty deep today, and it's not as expensive as I expected. Now, some of these guys can play other positions as well, so keep that in mind. But Altuve jumps off of the page as a great play today. He's been hitting the ball pretty solid. He does need to get a pretty good fantasy day, though, to pay off here, but he's nicely priced for his potential on the slate. Then we'll look at Nico Horner for the Cubs. Now, Horner has been up and down throughout the season, but he has got some good metrics today. He's not a home run hitter, but he can score good fantasy points, and he's done well against San Francisco already this year, so I do like him a lot. Another option would be Michael Busch, who can also play at first base. He has a little bit better home run potential today, and I do think the Cubs are a pretty decent team to look at. Horowitz for Toronto has some nice upside on the slate. He has had some really good games. He's hitting the ball phenomenally. He just doesn't have a huge height. He hasn't had a super high ceiling from total fantasy points, but he does have good metrics today, and he's definitely worth a look. Mike Massey for Kansas City is a nice cheap play at this position, and he's been hitting the ball pretty well lately, and he has a lot of good metrics for this particular matchup, and he's just nice and cheap. I do think Torres for the Yankees, India for Cincinnati, and Kiner Falefa for Toronto all are in play today, but they're definitely contrarian options on the slate. From a top ownership options, Altuve, Michael Massey, Nico Horner, Jonathan India, and Gleyber Torres will be at the top of that situation. Looking at third base, Rafael Devers comes off the page as one of my top plays on the slate. He has been really solid lately, though he's been inconsistent this season. Yesterday, he had a big game with a home run and a couple of RBIs and multi-hits. He's got another good matchup here, so he's definitely worth a look. Alex Bregman is in play here at this position. He's one of my favorite plays because of his price point. He's been pretty solid lately, and his price is still staying around $4,000, so as long as it stays in that range, he's going to be somebody I consider a lot. Candelario for Cincinnati. He can also play at first base, but he does fit better here at third. If you wanted to use him, he has good home run metrics today. And Joey Ortiz for Milwaukee looks like a solid option, though he has been inconsistent this season. He's nice and cheap and gives you some upside. And then kind of a Hail Mary play is Jake Berger for Miami. It's kind of a one-off here for them. He just draws good home run metrics for the slate. The top-owned option guy at this position is going to be Bregman. It's not close, so I think that he's probably the most chalky player on the slate right now. Looking at shortstop, so De La Cruz for Cincinnati, he's going to draw a lot of potential here at home. He tends to be better at home than on the road, especially when it comes to stolen bases and stuff. So I think he draws a lot of potential, and he hadn't had a stolen base in a few games. So I look for him to try to go for that, especially with his hitting really coming into play right now. He's a super expensive though. Corey Seager for Texas looks really interesting today as a home run hitter. He's been inconsistent this season, but he does draw good metrics today. David Hamilton is a guy that I probably haven't ever talked about all that much from a hitting perspective, but right now his metrics are off the charts for this game, and he's been hitting the ball pretty well lately when he draws a start. So you obviously got to make sure he's in the starting lineup, but he should have some pretty good ownership on the slate. Bo Bichette has really struggled this season, but he should be back from his injuries today. And if he is in the lineup, then he'll be somebody I would consider, though he definitely carries some risk as he has really struggled this season. And then Dansby Swanson for the Cubs. He really has struggled all year, but he's really improved in the last couple of weeks, and he does draw good home run metrics today. Max Sherman for Oakland at $2,500, and Zach Neto for the LA Angels is also interesting on the slate. It's kind of contrarian plays. The top ownership options will be Corey Seager, David Hamilton, and Max Sherman from Oakland. Looking at outfielders, we have quite a few guys. I'm just going to move this over here so I can show you the outfield here. So for the top overall plays, Ohtani, Juan Soto, Jordan Alvarez, and Jarren Duran come off the page as some of the best options that more expensive here. But I also like some really good mid-range plays and Willie Abreu, Andrew McCutchen, Dalton Varsho, Chisholm Jr., and Andy Pages. I think all these guys have some phenomenal upside. Brian Reynolds, Jared Kalenic, MJ Melendez, Taylor Ward, Jake Fraley, Yoshida, and then De La Cruz for Miami. I think all these guys have really good metrics today, and they have a lot of potential, but they're a little bit more contrarian than the top overall list of Abreu, McCutchen, Varsho, Chisholm Jr., and Pages. But your top ownership guys today are going to be Jordan Alvarez, Juan Soto, Jarren Duran, and Ohtani. And then the cheaper options will be Melendez, Yoshida, Willie Abreu, Trent Grisham, and McCutchen. So do keep that in mind. Here's the stacks. Here's the players from each team that I like the most when it comes to stacking. So you can look at that there. With that said, I think this slate is going to be pretty tough from a fantasy perspective because so many games, having 12 games, it definitely makes the variance a little bit higher. So you want to definitely try to make different ways, try to be weird and different. Pulling some one-off players from these bottom teams is definitely a good way to help you do that. But you definitely want to stack. You definitely want to have guys from these top, teams in your lineups as well. And pitching, like I showed you, is going to be really favorable to Brown because of his price point, and then either Lopez or Ryan, depending on they're priced very similarly, so you can kind of mix and match those guys. The strikeouts today are not nearly as good as they've been lately in some slates. And for a big slate like this, to only have one guy that has 7 strikeout potential, really or higher, is pretty surprising. And for that guy to be an $8,000 plays, really good, from a value perspective, because you can pay up at other positions a little bit better. So with that said, guys, thank you for